Now, before we go any further, I want to explain a few things that we've done here. So let's go back to our application file that's in our layouts folder, okay? So I've got it open here, but if you can't find it, just look under the apps directory, the app directory, and then go to the views folder. And then finally under views, there's this layouts folder, and then you want this application.html.erb. Okay, so that's where we added this navigation bar, right? So we've got this nice Bootstrap navigation bar. It seems to be working perfectly at this point. And we don't have our server running, so let's go ahead and start that up. All we have to do is click down here and say bundle. Make sure you click either on this or to the right. So we start up our server. And then let's take a look here. If I click this preview and then port 3000, we can pull it up. And so we've got this navigation bar, but I want to explain a few things. So if you take a look at some of this code, I want to show you what we've added here. Okay, so we've added quite a bit. Now, let's take this kind of step by step here. I want you to look at this first. Okay, so we've added this piece of code here where it says link to, and then SaaS, which stands for software as a service. You can go ahead and put any kind of site name here that you want. And when you save your file, right, and then look over here and refresh, that's going to show up. I'm just going to leave mine as SaaS for now, okay, just because it stands for software as a service, and save that. Now, what's going on here is we've got a bit of Ruby code that's sitting in between all of this that's sitting in between all of this HTML code. Okay, so most of this is HTML. This nav tag here is just an HTML tag. It's just like a div tag, but it's a little bit more descriptive. Okay, but it works just the same way as a div tag. Okay, it allows us to set out a division of space, okay, like a square or a rectangle, and put some content inside of it. And that's essentially what we've done here. We've created this rectangle at the top. And just as a side note, something interesting that you can do is you can change this default to inverse. And if you save that and then refresh, you'll get a black kind of inverted look. So if you want to go with something a little bit different, you can do that. That's just from the Bootstrap library, and you can read more about it. I'm going to leave it default for now. Now, this Rails line of code here, you can tell it's different because it has this angle bracket and then the percent and then this equals sign, right? And what that is, this tag right here is what we call an ERB tag. So notice at the extension of this file here, we didn't just leave it as a plain HTML file, right? We've added this .erb. Okay, so without the .erb, this line of code right here wouldn't work, and neither would this bit of code here, and so on. Anywhere where you see these ERB tags, they wouldn't actually work without this .erb extension added right here. Okay, so that's what that extension does. It allows us to embed Ruby code inside of an HTML file. That's all we're doing here. So anything in between these kinds of percent equals tags and this closing percent tag, that's all Ruby code. So this right here is a line of Ruby code. And all this is doing, okay, I want to explain this to you. This link to, all it's doing is converting into an anchor tag. It's converting into an HTML code. So we could actually technically get rid of this right here, and we could put an anchor tag in, just pure HTML. We could say, anchor tag, and then fill it out just like we're used to. And we'll send it to the home page, and that's how we do that. And then we'll just say software as a service, and then close it. And if I hit save and I refresh over here, you'll notice it still works, at least to some extent. We lost some of the CSS styling, but it's working the same way pretty much, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. But I want to point out that's what this link to is. It's a special method given to us by the Rails framework, okay? It's defined somewhere inside the Rails framework, and all it is a convenience method. It allows us to convert this piece of code right here into an actual anchor tag. And if you look back here, let's refresh it now that we changed it back. And if I right click on here and click inspect element, you'll see that it's nothing but an anchor tag. So our server actually transforms it into an anchor tag and sends it back to our browser when we request this page as pure HTML. Okay, so that link to right here, this Ruby code doesn't make its way back to the browser. Okay, this anchor tag, however, does. So it gets converted into an anchor tag first by Ruby, and then once it hits our browser, it's already been transformed to HTML. And there you go. And it's just linking to our homepage. And that /, that's all that means, is we want to go to the root directory of our actual website. Now, if you look here, there's a special format that these link to kind of methods work with, and you can always read about them just by going to link to Rails. If you just search that in Google, you'll find all kinds of documentation on them. So if we click on the first link, you can kind of start to read about it. This documentation isn't the best, but you start to get used to how this documentation works, and you'll start to be able to find exactly what you're looking for really quickly. And if you look right here under link to, I'll just maximize this a bit. It says that it's going to create a link tag. There you go. It creates an anchor tag for us. So it's just a convenience method, and it has a certain format that you should follow. So we're going to see these quite a bit throughout our build out here, but just know that all they do is convert into anchor tags. So if you're ever wondering, what does this mean? Okay, I'm looking at some Rails code and I don't exactly know what it means. You can always just look it up and start reading documentation to start to get a sense of what it means. Now, the other thing you'll notice is with this about link here that's in our navigation bar. So I'm going to close this. Right, we've got this about link, and that should link to the about page that we created. That's the whole point of having a navigation bar, right? So, most websites have these navigation bars at the top so that you can go to the main pages. If we click on this, however, it's not going anywhere. We're still stuck on the home page, and this kind of hashtag, this # shows up, if you can see that right there. Now, that's because what we've done is we've just created a placeholder. This is a common web development practice where we're saying, okay, we're going to come back to this later, but for now, we want to create a link tag here, and we're just going to make it a placeholder for now, and it's not going to do anything. So to actually make it do something, we follow this same format here. Okay, so we say link to, and we give it the name that we're going to show up on the actual, HTML. And then after this comma here, we need to set the destination. So we could manually write some HTML. We could just do this. /about, and if I save that, okay, and then come back here and refresh and click on this now, you'll see it does switch to the about page. You'll see the URL changed. We're actually on a different page. It doesn't look very different because we haven't added much here, but we are on a totally different page now. And I can click this logo link here, our main, site name link here, and it'll bring us back to the home page. So now we're linking back and forth between the two pages, and that's great. And again, if you right-click on this and hit Inspect Element, you'll see that it is producing, the Rails application is actually producing an anchor tag, a valid HTML anchor tag for us. That's what's getting sent back to our browser from the server. Okay, so that's good. That's what we want. But now here's the thing. We don't want to hard code these URLs, or these paths, I should say. Okay, so what we're doing here is we've hard coded the page that we want to go. We want to go to whatever our domain name is /about, right? So that's what we've hard coded into here. But that's not a good practice because over time, things might change. The page name or the page URL might change, and we have to track down everywhere where we've kind of pasted this, piece of code in, and that could get really tedious. And right now, you may not get a sense of how problematic that is, but trust me, down the line, when you're working on big projects, it becomes a real pain if you don't, do this more programmatically. So hard coding stuff like this is bad. So how do we do something like this? Okay, we've got this root path, and that will always go back to the root, the home page of our site. So if we look at our routes file, so let's go to this config folder here and find the routes file. This is where our actual website URLs are defined. Okay, so we've got a home page, and that looks at the pages controller and then executes the home action. That's what that line means. And we'll elaborate on this a little bit more down the line. But now we also define this other line of code here, right? And so when we did that, what we were saying is whenever a user wants to go to this /about page, whether they go here and manually write it in the URL, or they click on a link like this that automatically takes them there, then we need to make sure they go to the pages controller and we show the about action. And all that really means is we just show the about page. So we'll elaborate on that a little bit more. But for now, all you need to know is because we've written this, we get a special path, okay? We get this special route that we can use. And I'll show you how it kind of works. All we have to do is go back here, and instead of writing this hard-coded path, we can just say the about path, like that, okay? So we programmatically write that in, and if I save it and I refresh here, everything works just the same, okay? If you click around, everything's working the way we want it to. And if we inspect here, nothing's really different, okay? But the benefit is we haven't hard-coded anything in here. So things are working a little bit more dynamically. So going forward, we'll elaborate on that a little bit more if you didn't quite follow along. But now we've got a much more cleaner way of writing our actual navigation links.